Well, now we're going to look at our fourth personality type. And when we're done with that, we're going to look at some illustrations of how they all work together and why each one is so important. If your column that's the highest is a B, you are a beaver. Now, a beaver is an amazing person. Without beavers, we wouldn't want brain surgery, heart surgery. You would not want to get into a building because it probably would collapse at some point. You wouldn't want to drive your car on a bridge. Beavers are really, they are engineers, architects, surgeons, anything where exactness is important. A moderate beaver, say 26 to 30, wants to do things right. And it's very important that they do things right. Whereas a high beaver, especially we'll say 36 and above, is a perfectionist. So that's what beavers do. Now I'll read you what we've written about beavers. Beavers have a strong need to do things right by the book. This is the personality type that starts a project with an instruction book. They do everything by the book. In fact, they are the kind of people who actually, like we say, read instructions. A lion, like me, that's the hardest thing in the world. When I see an instruction book, I have a son who is a high beaver. He is a surgical resident. He's an MD, and he's in his, right now he's in his fourth year of his surgical resident. He's going to become a heart surgeon. And he is a perfectionist. And when he was a little boy, he loved Legos. Now, he didn't like the simple things like, 25 pieces or 50 pieces. He loved the Legos, even as a little boy, that came with an instruction book. Not a 10-page instruction book. We're talking 50, 75, 100 pages. And one time he asked me, he actually called for me to come downstairs. He was stuck, and he said, "Dad, can you help me with this?" And I looked at the instruction page, and I couldn't understand it. I couldn't follow it. I didn't have the patience to go back and see it in context and try to understand everything that went on before, and it was crazy. I said, "Devin, I can't help you." And so, but he got through it. He built it. He figured it out. But beavers, they love instructions, and they're incredibly conscientious. I have another son that is very high on beaver, and he plays the piano. And I remember when he was 14 years old, he asked me what my favorite music in the whole world was. And actually, I guess he was 12 when he asked me that. And I said, "Well, it's Rhapsody in Blue." And he said, "Can we get the music?" And I said, "Well, Sean, it's not a song. It is a 14 to 15, 16-minute piano concerto. And when it's a piano solo," I said, "it would really be probably pretty difficult." And Sean didn't read music. But he asked me to get the music. I got it. It was 32 pages. It's a 16-minute piece. And he had a piano instructor that, even though Sean couldn't read music, would take him through the piece, measure by measure, note by note, figure out the fingering. And I asked two piano teachers that he had. I said, "Can you teach my son," he's 12, "how to play Rhapsody in Blue?" after we bought the music. Two different teachers. One had been a college professor. Both said impossible. No child can play that song. I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, number one, Gershwin wrote it for himself, and the fingering is so complex that it requires big hands, big stretching, and your son he's too young. He couldn't do it." And but he really wanted to do it. And so I fired both of the teachers and found a teacher that said, "Watch Sean play a little Mozart concerto, a small piece." But there was a lot of crossover fingering. And he said, "Yeah, Sean can learn Rhapsody in Blue. Do you have a deadline?" And I said, "Yeah, 18, by the time he's 18. Well, they started working on it. And about a little over a year and a half later, he had all 31 pages in his mind. Not the picture on the page, but how to play it. And he played in a big ballroom for 600 people, 16 solid minutes. The fingering was amazing, and you just think, how's he doing it? In fact, a very famous concert pianist who fills auditoriums when he plays, he had met Sean and played with Sean at one point when Sean was a little boy, and he said, he played Rhapsody in Blue, and I said, yeah. He goes, oh my gosh, can I see it? So I showed him the tape, and he kept rewinding just to see how the fingering was done. Because Sean hit every note, every chord, did everything the way he was supposed to, but this man could not figure out how he was doing it, but the hands were moving incredibly fast and so on. So anyway, so he does Rhapsody in Blue, gets a standing ovation from 600 people, and I'm driving him home. And I said, Sean, that was amazing. Women were crying because it was so beautiful when he gets into that melancholy part of Rhapsody in Blue. And I said, Sean, that was just so amazing. And he looks at me and says, come on, Dad, you heard the mistakes. No, I didn't. And I've listened to Rhapsody in Blue, honestly, dozens of times because it was my favorite growing up. And I said, Sean, I didn't hear, I heard one mistake, but I said, I don't think anybody else heard it because I knew every note by ear. And so when I went to look at the video, I found a total of 7 mistakes that were imperceptible. Now, one of the keys on the piano was stuck in the down position. And when you're playing everything by ear, that had to mess with him. But nobody heard those mistakes, but he did. So instead of going, whoa, Dad, I did it, high five, it was, hey, Dad, you heard the mistakes. So that's typical of a beaver. So let's look at beavers. If you're a high beaver, you're going to identify with all this. If you're a moderate beaver, you'll identify with some of it. So your natural strengths, you're accurate. Man, somebody's operating on my brain or my heart, I want a beaver. I'll give them a personality test before I sign them as a surgeon. Number 2, they are analytical. We had a CFO in my other company that I started, the TV company for 35 years, and he was our CFO. Most CFOs, I shouldn't say most CFOs, most accountants, people that really love accounting, and in our case, the CFO, are high beavers. Everything has to be perfect. He was analytical. Holy mackerel. In fact, almost every project that we did at the beginning of the project, when I would explain what I was going to do, the celebrity I was going to get, and how I was going to sell the product, this particular man almost every time said, I don't believe it's going to work. Now, I don't know if he was doing that to motivate me to prove him wrong, or more likely, he really didn't believe from an analytical, logical point of view that this could work. Well, he became a multi-millionaire because our projects did work. And but he was so perfect guy for being our CFO, and he was a partner. In fact, he saved the company one time. Oh, it was crazy. I'm so grateful for him. They are thorough. They are industrious. They're very orderly. My sweet boy, who is the surgeon, comes to our house. They live hundreds of miles away from us, and when they come to visit, I'll wake up in the morning and guess what he's doing? He's sweeping crumbs off the kitchen floor. I don't even see the crumbs, but they're that attentive to detail. Orderly, methodical, exhausting. He is right now doing his interviews for the next stage of his career, which will be actual training in heart surgery, which is 2 to 3 years. And so he's doing interviews with all these different hospitals and the heart organizations within those hospitals. Do you know how long the interviews are? Each interview is 5 hours. I don't think there's a lion on earth that could go through a 2-hour interview. Maybe even a 15-minute interview or longer is too much for a lion. But he goes through them. He doesn't dread them. He doesn't panic. He goes through them because he's a high beaver. Okay, they have high standards, great intuition, because whatever they learn exhaustively. And that learned behavior put into even a new environment gets transferred, and that transfer in the brain we call intuition. They're very controlled. We've been through different experiences in our house health-wise, and Mom will always call Devin to get his opinion, and she'll be sobbing, and he'll just be so, Mom, calm down. Everything's going to be okay. That's my sweet boy, Devin. I absolutely adore him. What are their weaknesses? You think, wow, do they have weaknesses? Yeah, they have weaknesses. Number one, they're too hard on themselves. They're very analytical of their own. A success for them in their mind is rare because they always can think of the ways they could have done it better. They're too critical of others. They can be too critical. So if you're a beaver and you're married to any other personality type, leave your critical nature at the office. Don't bring it home, because criticism, unless it's given in the right way, can really damage people. And you don't want to be critical. One thing about my son, as he goes from rotation to rotation, his wife tells us this, he doesn't tell. People always end up loving him. They say, oh, he's got such a nice manner. If somebody makes a mistake, he doesn't come down on them hard or anything. And so they all talk about what a sweet young man he is. They are perfectionistic. Perfectionism can be really hard because we don't live in a perfect world. You know, I got my glider pilot license when I was 17, and I know how planes work, and I know how avionics work. And I will tell you, some pilots are perfectionists, but not all of them. Now, your navigator, man, they are always perfectionists. But another weakness, they tend to be overly cautious. So they're slow to make a decision. Now, a surgeon doesn't have that option. They have to make decisions on the fly. So they have to learn how to do that. Typically, a beaver will not make a decision without lots of input. Remember, a lion and an otter, they don't need hardly any input. A high beaver or a beaver wants all the input they can get so they don't make a mistake. It's that important to them that they're accurate and that they do good work. They're real bad with deadlines. Give a beaver a deadline and you will frustrate the crud out of them. In fact, they may quit because they want to do it right. I know our CFO almost never hit deadlines. I would go into his office and man, he's writing everything out and he's underlining. I knew one beaver that was a CEO of a company I worked for one time. And when he would write you a note, even his lettering was done with a straight edge. I mean, it was crazy. And, but they tend to not hit deadlines because they want lots of facts. They can be too picky, and we've seen that. I've got a couple kids that are beavers, and I have 7 kids, so we got it all covered. And then they can be overly sensitive because typically what happens, they'll say, oh, you know, you could do that a little better if you do it this way. Then the person gets mad because they see that as a criticism, so they attack. So then the beaver goes ahead and now they get their feelings hurt because they're a little oversensitive. They're good at giving criticism. They're not real good necessarily at taking it. Okay, let's talk about their disposition. They're slow-paced and task-oriented. They want to be right and they want to maintain quality. That's critical for them. Time management. They work slowly and have, like I said, have a hard time with deadlines. Communication style, they're good listeners. That's good. That's why they're good students. You know, you go through medical school, guess what? You got a lot of listening to do. And they communicate details. They're usually diplomatic. That's really good. Many of us have had doctors that aren't diplomatic. We keep them because they're good doctors, not because they're real personable. Decision making. They avoid making decisions they avoid making decisions if they can't access all the information they need. The beaver in pressure situations, beaver tries to avoid pressure or tense situations. And it says here they also ignore deadlines, like we say. Greatest needs, the beaver needs security, gradual change, and time to adjust it. And what they desire, they want clearly defined tasks. Why? See, a lion, you can just say, hey, we need to do this. And he'll figure out a way to get it done. You tell a beaver, I want you to do that. The first question they'll ask is, well, how do you want it done? Do you want it this way or that way, this way or that way? I don't know. You just do what's best. I mean, you can drive a beaver personality nuts by not giving them clear instructions. And it's really interesting. Their weakness, one of their weaknesses is not making deadlines, but another one is they're so far away from making deadlines, they can really mess up on projects because it has to be done perfect. So beavers can be frustrated by people that aren't driven by excellence, aren't driven by the need for perfection. So that's a beaver.